Welcome back to the Cozy Rosy Crochet channel, and today I'm sharing with you how to crochet this Filet Crochet reindeer panel. So the reindeer panel is one of 12 different panels to choose to make your very own jolly holiday blanket. You can choose to make this blanket in any weight yarn you like. Just bear in mind that the finished size will be changed if you use a larger or a smaller weight yarn. I'm going to be using this Paintbox Yarns Simply Aran, and I'm working all my panels up in shade number 226 and using a contrast colour for the joining and the edging. I'm going to be using a 5.5mm hook today, even though the recommended hook size is a size 5, simply because I want this blanket to be super snuggly and have a little bit of drape to it. I've used nearly the whole ball to create this square, which is about 180 to 184 meters of Aran weight or worsted weight yarn. Gather all of your materials and let's get started. So we're going to start with the slip knot on our hook, and we're going to make a chain of 66, just as we will for all of our squares. We're making a chain of 66. 65 and 66. We're going to continue with the remainder of row 1, starting by making 1 US double crochet into the 4th chain from hook. A US double crochet is the same as a UK treble crochet. So we're going to yarn over the hook and find our 4th chain. So this loop doesn't count. There's 1, 2, 3 and 4. So we're going to insert our hook underneath just the top of that first loop of our chain, because we are going to be joining these squares or blocks together, and of course putting a border on too. We're going to yarn over the hook to bring our loop up, pull through 2 and pull through 2 to complete that US double crochet. Now these skip chains here, these 3 chains left, are going to count as our first double crochet, so we already have 2. We're going to work 1 US double crochet into each chain, across back down to the end of our row, and you should have a stitch count of 64 at the end of row 1. So continue to work across and I'll meet you at the end of row 1. So at the end of row 1 you should have a total of 64 US double crochets, counting that starting chain of 3 as your first double crochet. Going into row 2, we're going to make our turning chain of 3. Now this chain 3 always counts as a stitch, and in this filet crochet pattern it also counts as your first double crochet of your first block. For row 2, we're not doing anything fancy. We're simply going to work back along, working 1 double crochet into each stitch across. Now because that chain 3 counts as our first double crochet, we don't work into the stitch underneath it. We start by working into that next stitch. So that's 1, 2, 3, and we're working the whole way across, making sure that we maintain our stitch count of 64 double crochets. Complete your second row, working 1 double crochet into each stitch across, and I'll meet you for row 3, where we will start our filet crochet. So I've just reached back to my turning chain from the beginning of that first row, and it's really important to remember that at the end of each row, to continue making 64 double crochets, we need to make sure we work 1 last double crochet into the top of our turning chain. This is really important because it helps to ensure that your filet crochet is worked at the same point regardless of which direction or which row you're working. So at the end of row 2 you should still have a stitch count of 64. Going straight into row 3, we start with our turning chain of 3. Remember that chain 3 counts, so we don't work into that stitch, we're working into the next one, and we're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 30 stitches. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Once you've worked those 30 double crochets, we're then going to make a chain of 2. We then skip 2 stitches, yarning over, ready to work into that third stitch, placing the first of 30 double crochets. What we've done by working that chain 2 and skipping those 2 stitches is create our first open filet block. We're going to be working those 30 double crochets, and that will take us all the way back to our turning chain, and then I'll meet you there ready to work one final double crochet into that turning chain. Once we've worked those 30 double crochets back down to our turning chain, the last thing to do is to work one final double crochet into the top of our turning chain. Going into row 4, we're starting with our turning chain of 3. We're then going to work one double crochet into each of the next 27 stitches. That's 3 and 27. We then make our chain of 2. We skip 2 stitches, and that brings us back to the beginning of that last open block. We're going to be working one double crochet into each of the next 4. So we've chained 2, skip 1, skip 2, work 1, and we're then going to work 4 double crochets. So there's number 1, and number 2 and 3 are going to be worked into our open block. So that's 1 and 2, so that's 1, 2, 3, working our 4th one into the top of the next stitch. So this is how we work a closed block over an open block. So you've got 1 at each side and the 2 that are worked into the chain 2 space. After we've worked those 4 double crochets, we make a chain of 2, then we skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 27. So that's 3, 4. Now these 27 will take us all the way back to the end of our row, back to where our turning chain is, where of course we're going to work that last double crochet into the top of our turning chain. So I'll meet you at the end of row 4 to work that last double crochet. I'm just working my final double crochet into the top of my turning chain, and that marks the end of row 4. So we have the beginnings of a reindeer, believe it or not. So going into row 5, we're actually repeating row 3 that we did just a few moments ago. So we start with our turning chain of 3, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 30 stitches, 3 and 30. We then chain 2, we skip the next 2 stitches, ready to work 1 double crochet, into each of the next 30 stitches. So that's 2 and 3, 4. So continue to work down. Those 30 stitches will bring you back to your turning chain, and of course we'll be working that last, or that we'll then be working that 1 extra double crochet into the turning chain to keep our stitch count at 64. I'll see you at the end of row 5. So at the end of row 5, you should now be looking a little bit like that. And we're going to go straight into row 6. We start with our turning chain of 3. We're then going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 24 stitches. 2, 3 and 24. We then chain 2. We're going to skip the next 2 stitches, working 1 double crochet into the next 4 stitches. 3 and 4. We chain 2, skip that open space there, so skip the chain 2 space, working 1 double crochet into the next 4 again. That's 2, 3 and 4. We then chain 2 before we skip the next 2, and we're going to be working 1 double crochet into each of the next 24 stitches. But just so you can see, at this point you should have 3 open stitches or 3 open blocks in your row so far. So there's number 1 of 24. So we're working a further 1 double crochet into the next 24 stitches, and that will take you all the way back to your turning chain, where we'll be working that final double crochet. I'll meet you at the end of row 6. So I'm just working my final double crochet into the top of my turning chain for the end of row 6. And there we are. So far, this is all that we have. We're going to go straight into row 7, and for row 7 we're repeating row 2 with our turning chain of 3 and working 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain across. It's important to remember that when you're working into those chain spaces that there are 2 chains, so we need to make sure that we work 2 double crochets into those spaces to maintain our stitch count of 64. Continue working across, and I'll meet you at the end of row 7, not forgetting to work that final double crochet into the top of that turning chain. I'll see you in a moment. So I'm just working my final stitch into my turning chain for row 7, and we're going to go straight into row 8. So we make our turning chain of 3, and we're going to be working 1 double crochet into each of the next 21 stitches. 2, 3 and 21. We then chain 2, we skip the next 2 stitches before we work 1 double crochet into each of the next 16. That's 2, 3 and 16. We then chain 2, we skip the next 2 stitches before we're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 21 stitches, which will take us all the way back to that beginning turning chain where we work that 1 last double crochet. So continue to work across, and I will meet you back at the end of row 8. So at the end of row 8, our reindeer head is getting a little bit larger. So for row 9, we begin with a turning chain of 3, and once again we're going to be working 1 double crochet into each stitch across. We're going to maintain that stitch count of 64, so continue to work 1 double crochet into each chain and each chain across, and I'll meet you at the end of row 9. So at the end of row 9 you should still have your stitch count of 64 stitches, and for rows 10 through to 13 we are going to repeat the last 2 rows, rows 8 and 9, 2 more times. So repeat row 8 and row 9 twice more, or 2 more times. You can use the timestamps to follow along, or just use your current work as a guide, and I will see you ready for row 14. So at the end of row 13 you should still have a stitch count of 64, and you should have 3 open blocks in a line, and we're going to go straight into row 14 where things get a little bit more detailed. We're going to start with our turning chain of 3, and we will start by making 1 double crochet into each of the next 21 stitches. 3, 4 and 21. We then make our chain of 2, we skip the next 2 stitches, working 1 double crochet into the next 4. So that's 2, 3 and 4. We chain 2, skip 2 again and repeat that. So we work 1, 2, 3 and 4, chain 2, skip 2 and repeat it for a 3rd time. So work 1, 2, 3 and 4, chain 2. So we should have this nice little section here. We skip the next 2, we've done our chain 2 there, and then we're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 21. So as you can see, that's starting to put some extra open spaces in the middle of the reindeer's face. So we're working another 21 double crochets, that's number 4, and that will take us all the way back to our turning chain, where we work that final double crochet into our turning chain. I'll see you at the end of row 14. So at the end of round 14, we should still have a stitch count of 64. Doing our turning chain for row 15, we're going to start by working 1 double crochet into each of the next 18 stitches. So that's 2, 3 and 22. We then chain 2, skip the next 2 before we work 1 double crochet into each of the next 18, working a final double crochet into the top of that turning chain. Continue to work across and I will meet you at the end of row 15. So at the end of row 15, we should still have that stitch count of 64, and you should have just 2 open spaces in this row. Going straight into row 16, we start with our turning chain of 3. We're then going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 15 stitches. That's 2, 3 and 15. We then chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 4. So that's 3 and 4. We then chain 2 before we work 1 double crochet into each of the next 16. So that's 2, 3. Oh, I didn't skip. I thought I'd done something a bit weird there. So we've done our chain 2, we skip 2 and then work 1 double crochet, that looks better, into each of the next 16. That's 2, 3 and 16. We chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 4. So that was 1, 2, 3 and number 4. We chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the last 15. That will take you all the way up to your turning chain, where we're going to be working that extra 1 double crochet into the top of our turning chain. I will see you at the end of row 16. So at the end of row 16, you should still have a total stitch count of 64, and of course you've worked into the top of that turning chain. Going straight into row 17, we're going to work our turning chain of 3, and start by working 1 double crochet into each of the next 24 stitches. So that was 1, 2 and 24. We're then going to make our chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 10 stitches. So that's 1, 2 and 10. We then chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 24 stitches, which will of course take us back to that final turning chain where we work 1 extra double crochet. Continue working along, making those last 24 double crochets and adding in that final double crochet into the top of your turning chain, and I'll meet you at the end of row 17. So at the end of row 17, we're starting on our reindeer's antlers. Going into row 18, we've got 1 final row that's nice and easy. I've made my turning chain of 3. We're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 27 stitches. And 27. We then chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 4. That's 2, 3 and 4. We then chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 27, and that will take us all the way back to our beginning turning chain from the previous row, where we need to place that 1 last double crochet into the top of that turning chain. So continue to work across, working those 27 double crochets, and I'll see you for the beginning of row 19, where things are going to get a little bit more interesting. So at the end of row 18, we still have our 64 double crochets, and we're going to go straight into row 19, where we're working a lot of detail onto our antlers. We're going to start with our turning chain of 3. We're going to start by working 1 double crochet into each of the next 12 stitches. That's 2, 3, and 12. We then chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. That's number 3 and 4. We chain 2, and we're repeating that again to skip the next 2, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 4. That's number 3 and number 4. We chain 2, skip the next 2, and we're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 10. So that's 2, 3, 4 and 10. We chain 2, skip the next 2 before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 4. That's 2, 3 and 4. We chain 2, skip the next 2 again, ready to repeat that 4 double crochets. So that's 1, 2, 3 and 4. We chain 2. I'm going to skip the next 2, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 12 stitches. So you should be looking like you've got 3 on each side, and we're working back to the end of our row, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 12, remembering to work 1 final double crochet into the top of our turning chain. I'll meet you at the end of row 19. So at the end of row 19, you should still have your stitch count of 64. We've made our turning chain of 3, and we are ready to start by working 1 double crochet into each of the next 9 stitches. So that's number 1, 2, and 9. We chain 2, skip the next 2, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 10. So that's 1, 2, 3. Once we've worked those 10 double crochets, we make, oops, a mess. We make a chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 16 stitches. That's 2, 3, 4, and 16. We chain 2 again, skip the next 2 stitches, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 10. That's 3, 4, and 10. We chain 2 before working, oh no, we chain 2, skip the next 2 before working 1 double crochet into each of the last 9 stitches. As always, we're going to work that final double crochet into the top of our turning chain, and this is where we're at the end of row 20. Going straight into row 21, we start with our turning chain of 3. We're then going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 6. That's 1, 2, 3, and 6. We then chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 10. That's 2, I think, yeah, 2, 3, and 10. We then chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, and this time we're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 22 stitches. That's 3, 4, we then skip 2 after working those 22 stitches, skip 2, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 10 stitches. That's 2. Once we've worked those next 10, we're chaining 2, ready to skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next or last 6 stitches. That will bring us back to our turning chain, ready to work that final double crochet in the top of that turning chain. So at the end of row 21, you should have just 4 open blocks. We are going to go straight into row 22, starting with our turning chain of 3. We're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 15 stitches. That's 1, once we've worked those 15 double crochets, we make a chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 28 stitches. So that's 3, once we've worked those 28 double crochets, we are going to make our chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 15 stitches, which of course will take us all the way up to the end of our row. And we're just going to have to work that final double crochet into the top of our turning chain. You should have 1 space stepping back from each side in this row. I'll meet you at the end of row 22. We should still have our stitch count of 64 double crochets at the end of row 22. Just on my turning chain of 3, ready to go into row 23. We're going to start by working 1 double crochet into each of the next 12 stitches. That's 2, 3. We've worked those 12 double crochets. We then make our chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 4. So that's 3 and 4. We chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 22 stitches. That's 2, 3. Once we've worked those 22 double crochets, we make a chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 4. So that's 2, 3 and 4. We chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 12, which of course will take us back to our turning chain, and I'll meet you at the end of row 23. So going straight into row 24, we've made our turning chain of 3, and we're going to make 1 double crochet into each of the next 21 stitches. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Once we've made those 21 double crochets, we make our chain of 2, skip 2, we're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 16. So that's 2, 3, 4. Once we've made those next 16 double crochets, we chain 2, skip the next 2 before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 21 stitches, which would of course take us to the end of our row, where we're going to work that final double crochet into the top of our turning chain. I'll see you at the end of row 24. So at the end of row 24, we should just have those 2 little open spaces there, and we're going to go straight into row 25 with our turning chain of 3. We're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 12 stitches. That's 2, 3. Once we've worked those 12 double crochets, we make our chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches, and we're going to work this 3 times, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 10. make our chain of 2, skip 2, and do that 3 times. That's 4, 5, and 10. We chain 2. This is the first time we've done this. That's skip 2. We're going to repeat that twice more, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 10, and then make our chain of 2 and skip 2. 5, this is the second time we've done those 10 double crochets, chain 2, skip 2, and then for the final time we're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 10. That's 3. So we're just done our final 10 stitches, chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches. We're then working 1 double crochet into each of the next 12, which of course brings us back to the end of our row, where we're going to work 1 double crochet into our turning chain. I'll meet you at the end of row 25, where row 26 is going to be super simple. Nice easy one with no fillet in it whatsoever. I won't meet you, I'm right at the end of my row already. It's working my double crochet into my turning chain. So we should have 4 blocks at the end of row 25, and of course I still have our same stitch count of 64 double crochets. For row 26 we make our turning chain of 3, and we're simply going to work 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain across. So work 1 row of double crochet in each stitch and chain, and I'll meet you for row 27. At the end of row 26 you should still have your stitch count of 64. Going straight into row 27, we're starting with our turning chain of 3, and we're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 12 stitches. That's 2, 3. Once we've worked those 12 double crochets, we make our chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 34 stitches. So that's 2, 3. Once we've worked those 34 stitches, we're going to make our chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 12 stitches. Oh, I've got a twiddly there. That's 2, 3. So at the end of row 27 you should just have those 2 spaces, and we're going to go straight into row 28 with our turning chain of 3. We're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 15 stitches. That's 3. Once we've worked those 15 stitches, we're going to make our chain of 2. We skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 28 stitches. So that's 2. Once we've worked those 28 stitches, we're going to make our chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 15. So that's 2, 3, and that of course takes us up to the end of our row, where we need to work that final double crochet into the top of our turning chain. I will see you at the end of row 28, ready for our second from last row. We're nearly there. There we are. So the actual reindeer itself is complete, and we're going to be working row 29 and row 30 are exactly the same. So row 29 and 30 are the same, and all we need to do is to work 1 double crochet into each stitch across to complete the final 2 rows of our square. Remember, of course, to add in those last or the extra double crochet into the top of your turning chain on each row, so you end with a total row count of 30, and of course your stitch count is still 64. Thank you for joining me for this tutorial. There are a total of 12 different squares going to be coming out that we can be joined together in any order and in any quantity to create your very own jolly holiday blanket. You can find all the details over on the playlist, and head to the description box to find the written pattern, and of course you can find a sneak peek of all the squares that are going to be available as part of this crochet along. Thank you as always for joining me. I will see you in the next video.